All right, so here are the components for our Bluetooth speaker. You have two speakers, an amplifier, a Bluetooth board, power, volume, power, and continuous loop interrupter. Here is our amplifier, front and back. The screws, so you have your negative wire, your positive power wire, and then your 4 positive and negative speaker wires. This is our Bluetooth board. You have your power input and your channel outputs. Left channel, right channel. This is our ground loop insulator. This device is important because we're sharing a power source. This will eliminate the buzz. So what we're going to do is we're going to be cutting off the female ends and then stripping those. This is our 12-volt power source. I think it's 1.25 amps. That's the power end that's going to attach to our Bluetooth board. This is our switch. Just a basic switch. We're going to be using 2 poles off of that switch. And our potentiometer or volume control. Input, output, and ground. Our speaker, one of 2. The speaker wire has already been soldered to a speaker wire. Our LED indicator, 100 ohm resistor, and wire nuts. And these are the wires that we're going to use to connect everything up. These wires have all been cut and stripped, exposing the conductive metal underneath the insulation. Here is our power cable. So we're going to need to take this, we're going to cut this, about 8 inches from the tip. And this wire needs to be split and stripped. So cut the end with wire cutters, separate them out. Get your strippers, give yourself about a little bit less than 1/2 inch. And then what we need to do is we need to twist these wires nice and tight so they don't fray. Give yourself a solid 3, 4, 5 twists. Then you want to identify the wire with the dashed line. You can see the dashed line. That's an indicator of your positive wire. Once we locate that wire, we're going to get some red electrical tape. And we're going to indicate that wire by wrapping a piece of red tape around it, just to take the guesswork out of which is my positive wire, and set that aside. Then you're going to take the end back to the power source, and again you're going to split that wire, separate it out, same process. Again, identify the wire with a dashed line and indicate that wire with a piece of red electrical tape. So the next component we're going to trim and split and strip is our ground loop insulator. Just removing the wrap now. Find the 2 female ends, trim those as close to the connector as you can, and discard those. Pull those apart. This is very important because the ground wire is actually insulating the negative wire. So what you're going to do is you're going to tease out the right and left signal wire underneath the ground wire. So you can see I'm going to strip that, and you can see the red white wire in there. I'm going to tease that out, and the remaining strands of wire is my ground wire. Which I'm going to give 8-10 good twists. Again, tease out the left channel wire, separating away the ground wire, bind those wires nice and tight. Then I'm going to take both of those ground wires eventually and twist them together. There's my two ground wires. Crisscross them. And then give them a good 8-10 twists. Being careful to look for any stray wires that might be in there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the right channel, strip the left channel. You want to give yourself here probably about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little less than 1/4 of an inch. Again, twist those wires up nice and neat. And we're going to set that aside. And then this is our potentiometer. You want to always make sure that you align the potentiometer to your left. I know in the video it appears to be aligned to my right, but if it's actually aligned to my left, you always want to align it to you want to make sure that the knob is aligned to your left. And then we're going to solder our connection wires to those terminals. So I'm going to start with the left channel and then the right channel for my input. Solder that to the terminal. Then I'm going to work my output, left channel, right channel. I like to put a little hook in the end of that. I'm not cutting that, I'm just creating a little hook. Makes it easier to solder. And then the last two terminals are your ground. We're going to do those in black. Make sure I've got a good solder joint again for my ground wires. And then a part that's a little bit tricky is what we got to do is combine our ground wires. And we're going to do that by taking a smaller black wire, bending that into a U. I like to hook those ends and attaching that connector to both of the ground terminals, and then solder that in place. Got to move those wires out of the way to make it convenient and easy for you to solder. Looks like I lost my solder joint there, but that's okay, that happens. Over the post, over the terminal, and there we go. So my potentiometer, my volume control, is now ready to be wired to our other components. It's going to make it a lot easier when we go to wire our amplifier and our Bluetooth board to our potentiometer on the sound side of our circuitry. Okay, this is our switch. We're working with terminal 1 and terminal 3. We're working with the positive wire. So this is the positive wire for our power supply. solder that to that terminal. That's our amplifier board. I need to unscrew these terminals. And those are the two that I'm looking for. So I'm going to insert a red wire indicating positive wire into the 12 volt power supply, and a black wire indicating the ground wire. And then the other end of the power supply, I'm making sure that positive to positive, and negative to negative, and screw those wires down tight. This is our shared power supply, so power is going to flow from our amplifier board into our Bluetooth board. There is our shared power supply. That's why it's necessary to have our ground loop isolator or ground loop insulator to prevent the electronic buzz that can be caused from sharing a power supply. Now we're ready to get into more of the electronic side. And what you're going to need is two other wires, and you're going to marry those with a wire nut coming off of the amplifier wire. And you're going to do the same thing with the negative wire or the ground wire coming off the amplifier. Add two additional wires, so you're actually wiring together three wires using a wire nut. Okay, so it's basically a splice. I've got my power source, and I'm splitting that wire off into two directions. One of the positive wires are going to go back to my switch. So that positive wire I'm going to solder back to my switch so that we can open and close our circuit. And I have a one wire left. To this wire, I'm going to attach my 100 ohm. I'm going to take my LED. The long lead of the LED is positive, so that's what I'm going to attach to the resistor. So I've got the positive wire off of my power supply to a resistor to the positive lead of the LED. And now I have a negative wire. Now I'm going to work the negative wires. There's the negative wire. Okay. We're almost done completing the circuit. Sometimes it's useful to kind of hold that wire down. Solder the negative wire in place. And then I have one more negative wire. And that's going to go back to the negative wire off of my power supply. And that is going to complete my circuit. Just going to hold that down, solder that in place. And the electronic circuit is complete. So there's my positive wire to the board, feeding to the LED, feeding to the resistor to the LED to the negative wire to the end of the LED. And then when it's all plugged in, I should have an LED that illuminates and a Bluetooth board that blinks. That's going to begin searching for an audio player. When it finds an audio player and is paired with an audio player, that blinking green LED on the Bluetooth board will be a solid green. Now we're going to switch to the audio side, our audio circuit, or our sound circuit. I'm going to attach the red end of the loop insulator to the red right channel and the white to the left channel. So this is my input. Again, this is coming from the Bluetooth board. This is where the sound signal is going to be coming from. So I'm going to take my white wire from the input or the top. It's usually easy if you hook both of those. So white to white. It's convenient sometimes to hold that down, solder that in place. White to white. Red to red. Create your little hooks. Solder that into place. And then black to ground. Trim off any excess to kind of neaten things up. And then black to ground. Okay. And the input, our sound input to our potentiometer is done. Now I have to work on the output. Touch up a little bit more soldering, make sure I've got a good solid solder joint in place. Then we're going to wrap all of those exposed joints, all of those exposed solder joints with a nice piece of electrical tape, just basically closing those off or insulating those so we don't get any static or any shorts in our sound circuit. Okay, and then here is our output from our amplifier. You can see that there's a red right channel, a white left channel, and a black ground wire coming off of our amplifier board. So we want to strip those, giving ourselves, a little bit less than a quarter of an inch of exposed wire. And again, it's the same process. This can be a little fidgety, but with a little bit of practice and patience, you can solder that in place. And then your exposed black wire, what was black, there was black insulation around there. The exposed copper wire, the remaining exposed copper wire is your ground. Wrap that around your ground wire from your potentiometer and solder that in place. And you are done. So, now our audio circuit is also complete. We've got our input and our output. Now all we need to do is attach our speakers. So you have a positive and a negative coming from the speaker. Plus is positive, minus is negative. What I like to do is find the positive wire, the wire that's attached to the positive terminal of the speaker, wrap that with red tape just to help you so there's no confusion when it comes time to attach your speakers to your amplifier. Again, we've identified the positive wire and wrap that with a red wire. Positive wire, wrap that with a red piece of tape. So I have my speakers attached, red to positive. Find your board, it's either Wandem or typically it's Wandem. So you see a solid green light means it's paired, and play your music. And that is it.